Lost is the weakest healer, only able to use a basic healing spell, and because of this, he gets kicked out from his party. Everyone around him labels him as an ignorant loser, but they had no idea he possesses a hidden power, unlike anything they have ever seen. So what will happen when the weakest healer turns out to be the strongest adventurer of all? The story kicks off when this young girl gets stranded, left all by herself after a gang of goblins wrecks the carriage she was riding in. These goblins are about to finish her off, but out of nowhere, this mysterious kid shows up and throws down to protect her. The girl's blown away by how tough this adventurer is. Fast forward a few years, Lost is chilling at the guild when a girl comes up and asks to team up with him. The whole guild stops what they're doing, stunned that anyone would ask Lost of all people to party up. Even Lost himself can't believe it. He's confused as to why she would pick him, but then she points out the sign he's holding, saying he's looking for people to join his crew. Her name's Narcina, and she introduces herself as a martial artist who needs a partner. But before Lost can even say a word, the guild's receptionist Amherst rushes over and grabs Narcina by the shoulder. She straight up tells her that Lost is worthless. Yes, he's a healer, but all he's ever learned is that one weak healing spell. Even though he's been in the adventuring game since he was a kid, he can't use any big healing magic or even heal a group. Everyone in town thinks he's a joke. Despite that, there was a crew called Blade of Lightning that took him in for a while, but he was so bad that they eventually booted him out. Now, since everyone sees him as a failure, nobody wants him on their team anymore. Amherst warns Narcina, telling her she won't make any money working with someone as clueless as Lost, but Narcina's got stacks of cash, so making a profit isn't a concern for her. To prove her point, Narcina pulls out a fat bag of money, and it's clear she doesn't know the streets because in a place like Detroit, she would have been robbed on sight. Amherst tells her she better be careful since a lot of adventurers around here don't exactly follow the rule. Narcina thanks Amherst for the tip and says she'll keep it in mind, but by the way she acts, it's obvious she didn't fully get what Amherst was saying. Amherst figures Narcina must be new to the game and offers to hook her up with some rookie-friendly adventurers to help her make it through the day without getting jacked. So Amherst says she'll help them out, but of course she's gonna charge a little something for her services. Narcina appreciates it, but she made up her mind a long time ago Lost is the only one she's rolling with. She's sticking to that. Amherst still doesn't think it's a smart move, but since Narcina's dead set on it, she gets the paperwork going to make it official. Narcina's curious about the papers, so Amherst explains they need to sign the registration to get officially recognized as a guild crew. Lost knocks out his part of the paperwork, then asks Narcina to sign her name. She was busy checking him out and gets caught off guard, but she goes ahead and signs. Once Lost covers the commission fee, it's a done deal. They're officially a party. As they roll out of the guild, Lost starts talking to Narcina about the Mardat Labyrinth, because that's where they're headed next. Turns out, no one's ever explored all the way to the end of the Mardat Labyrinth, so nobody knows what kind of beast is running the show down there or how deep it goes. Naturally, adventurers from all over started trying their luck, chasing the big rewards that might be waiting at the end. All those people coming through helped Mardat grow into the biggest labyrinth city out there. Narcina is soaking up everything Lost says, but she's a little nervous and asks if it's cool to hit the labyrinth right away. Amherst had warned Lost not to drag Narcina into the labyrinth too soon since she's still a rookie, and Lost definitely remembered, but he's brushing it off. Because of all the magic leaking out of the labyrinth, monsters can spawn in different spots around the city. The mountains, forests, wetlands, and plains are all areas where they show up, but out of all those, the plains are the safest since only weak monsters pop up there. Usually, a newbie adventurer would start off fighting in the plains to get a little battle practice, but the area's so big it can be tough to even find a monster to fight. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, they show up by the dozen. As long as you don't go too deep, the monsters aren't too strong, so Lost figures it's the fastest way for Narcina to level up her skill. Narcina's all in with Lost's plan, so they keep pushing toward the entrance of the labyrinth, but right before they head inside, she's hyped to pull her weight and says she's gonna take point, since fighters are supposed to lead from the front. Now, Lost usually doesn't hang back when he hits the labyrinth, but seeing how excited she is to take charge, he decides to let her do her thing as they walk through the dungeon, though he starts second-guessing whether Narcina's got the skills to handle herself in a fight. But then she shuts all that down real quick. Turns out, Narcina knows how to throw hands, and she handles a pack of goblins like it's nothing. She wipes them out without breaking a sweat, and Lost is straight up impressed with her moves. After the goblins bite the dust, they leave behind magic stones, and Lost picks them up. He breaks it down for Narcina, telling her adventurers turn these stones in at the guild for cash. She's curious about what the guild does with the stones, so Lost explains that they hold magical energy and get used in all kinds of tools and gear. That's the kind of thing most adventurers know, but Narcina's never been big on book smart. They end up with 5 stones, and even though goblin stones don't go for much, they'll make enough to cover a place to stay for the night. Lost gives her the option they can call it quits and head back, or they can dive deeper into the labyrinth and earn some more. Narcina's having a blast, so she's all for going deeper. As they move in further, Lost suddenly grabs Narcina and pulls her back. She's thrown off at first, not sure why, but then he picks up a rock and tosses it on the tile ahead. The ground opens up, it's a trap. If Lost hadn't stepped in, she would have fallen straight into a death pit. Narcina's stunned and asks how he spotted the trap. Lost explains that the tile was a different shade of gray than the rest, so he figured something was off. She's impressed, but points out that spotting traps is usually a thief's job. She's wondering how a healer like Lost Lost is so sharp with this kind of stuff. He just shrugs it off, saying he's been in the adventuring game long enough to pick up a few tricks along the way. They keep moving through the labyrinth, but before long, they run into an orc wandering the hall. Lost is caught off guard, cause orcs are mid-level monsters. They're not supposed to be up this high in the labyrinth. Narcina, seeing the size of this thing, asks if they should turn around and get out of there. Lost figures they don't need to run. He thinks that between the two of them, they've got enough power to take the orc down, but he's not about to make her fight if she doesn't feel ready. Narcina trusts his judgment and says she's down if he thinks they can win. They get set, and she charges right at the orc, but when her first kick connects, it's like hitting a solid boulder instead of a monster. The orc swings its club, aiming to crush her, but Narcina manages to block it with her hand. The hit's so strong though, it pushes her into a corner with nowhere to go. As the orc winds up for another strike, Lost jumps in, and with one clean stab of his sword, takes the orc down. He checks on Narcina, asking if she's alright. She's amazed and thankful that he saved her, but at the same time, she's wondering how Lost, who's supposed to be a healer, pulled that off. Lost brushes it off, saying he's picked up some fighting skills over the years, but right now, they've still got work to do, so they grab the magic stone from the orc. It's way bigger than the ones they got from the goblins, and since it's packed with more magic, they'll make a lot more money from it. Lost gives Narcina the option to head back to the guild, saying they've made enough cash for the day, and she's more than proved her skill, but Narcina isn't ready to call it quits yet. She wants to keep going. Lost agrees, and by the end of their run, they've stacked up a good amount of magic stone. When they return to the guild, they hand everything over to Amherst, and she's shocked they collected so many stones in just half a day. Then she spots the orc stone, and immediately starts chewing Lost out. She's mad because she specifically warned him not to take Narcina into the labyrinth, especially near the mid-level floors, since she's a beginner. Lost defends himself, saying he didn't take Narcina deep into the labyrinth at all. They stayed on the beginner level the whole time. The plan was to fight goblins, but for some reason, an orc ended up wandering up to the higher floors where they were. Narcina backs up Lost's story, so Amherst believes him. Besides, it's not too wild a tale since there's been a lot of reports lately about high-level monsters popping up in areas meant for beginners. Amherst doesn't know what's going on down in the labyrinth, but she figures it's probably something bad. Not that she cares all that much, she's not getting paid enough to stress over it. Then she asks Lost if he's planning to sell all the gems they collected. Lost says yes, and Amherst's whole vibe switches. She gets way too excited as she starts prepping his payment. Narcina notices how hyped Amherst is about buying these magic stones, and Lost explains that guild staff like her get a big commission when they buy stones from the adventurers they manage. When the money's ready, Lost is floored by how much they're getting, but Amherst reminds him half of that belongs to Narcina. Lost knows, but even his half is like 10 times more than he ever made when he was with Lightning Blade. That's when it hits him Lightning Blade had been ripping him off the whole time. Amherst finds that pretty funny, but Narcina steps in and reminds her that the guild is supposed to step in and settle pay disputes. Amherst says she can help Lost get his money back if he wants. He thinks about it for a minute, but then decides to let it go. He's got a new party now and doesn't want anything to do with Lightning Blade anymore. After Lost leaves, the guild's branch manager steps out. While Amherst is busy counting her money, the manager Handsome walks up and asks if Lost was just there. He wants to make sure Amherst didn't refer Lost to any party. She tells him no way she wouldn't dare send that fool to any group, but she mentions that there was one girl who insisted on teaming up with him, so her hands were tied. Meanwhile, Lost and Narcina roll up to an inn, where the innkeeper's daughter greets them. She asks if Narcina is the new girl who joined his party, and Lost says yes. He's a little curious how she already knows about it. The girl explains that word's been getting around. Nobody thought Lost would ever find someone to form a party with, but putting that aside, she asks if they're here to grab some food. Lost is definitely down for a meal, but first he wants to reserve a room, so he heads over to talk to the girl's mom. Mary smiles and asks if they want one room or two, tossing in a little tease about sleeping together. Narcina blushes at the thought, but Lost quickly says they'll take separate rooms. Truth is, Narcina didn't mind the idea of sharing a bed with him, even if she wasn't about to say it out loud. Later that night, they both head to bed. Once Narcina's alone in her room, her mind drifts back to the first time she crossed paths with Lost years ago. He'd saved her from a nasty accident and healed her with that basic healing spell of his. She was so grateful that day. In that moment, she made up her mind she was going to become an adventurer and stick by his side no matter what. Since then, Narcina had thrown herself into training day and night, and when she heard Lost got kicked out of his old party, she rushed straight to the capital to be the first one in line to team up with him. But now, as she lies in bed, she realizes something Lost probably doesn't even remember her. Not that it's surprising, she's changed a lot. She's taller, dresses differently, and even dyed her hair blue. It's like she's a whole different person, and now that she's here, she's seeing that Lost is way more talented than she thought. He doesn't need her protection like she imagined, but even if he never recognizes her, she's still determined to stand by him. Still, she can't help but wonder why people in this city think Lost some kind of idiot, even though he's really strong. The story flips back to the past, showing Lost in a fierce battle with a Hydra, fighting alongside his old crew. They're getting worked, and the crew's thief is hurt bad. Lost steps up, healing her. She asks him if his healing spell can deal with poison, and he admits it can, but if he helps her regain her strength, she'll be able to handle the poison on her own. The thief grumbles about it, and their boss snaps, telling them to stop whining and hurry up with the treatment. treatment. The thief fires back, telling their idiot leader she's in no shape to fight. The boss turns to Lost and orders him to fix her up. Lost reminds him that he told him to bring some antidote, but the leader was too cheap to buy them since they cost a fortune. The leader flips it on Lost, blaming him for only knowing basic healing spells despite being the team's healer. He then calls on Armia, the magician, who's frozen in fear, to hit the Hydra with some magic. She snaps out of it and hurls a fireball at the beast, but it doesn't do a thing. The leader, frustrated and thinking his whole crew is useless, realizes they're in over their head. He bails, shouting for everyone to retreat. Armia takes off after him, and Lost helps the thief Saberia escape by lending her a shoulder. The next day, Lost gets blamed for the mission's failure and gets kicked out of the group. Saberia tells him it's all because of him that they couldn't take down the Hydra, but Lost fires back, saying it's because she and the leader were too hyped up, stayed up all night, and couldn't perform at their best. The leader, feeling called out, asks if Lost is blaming them. Lost says he's not, but they turn to Armia for backup. Intimidated, she crumbles and points the finger at Lost, blaming him for everything. Turns out, Lost was dreaming about all this, and he wakes up, realizing the memory still haunts him. He drinks some water, thinking back to how something similar happened 6 years ago. Back then, he was already known as a fool, but he had big dreams of becoming a top-tier adventurer. That's when a certain crew hit him up, and he jumped at the chance to join them. But they didn't plan on using him for healing at all. They threw him right in front of the monster, treating him as bait. Lost took off running, dodging their attack, thinking how he'd been treated this way his whole life as a labyrinth orphan. But that didn't make it any easier to swallow. When the monsters got bored of chasing him, they went after his party and wiped them all out. Lost barely made it out alive, and it gnawed at him that nobody would ever see him as a real adventurer. That's when he stumbled on some goblins attacking a carriage. Inside, a girl was hiding from the monster. He didn't even know why, but he stepped in to save her. He figured maybe he could trade his worthless life to protect her, making his death mean something. But the monsters took him down. When he came to, he saw the girl standing in front of him, happy that he was awake. She told him that the knights had shown up and saved her just in time, and he felt like a fool for not being able to protect even one girl. But she still thanked him, saying the knights wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for him buying her some time. She even said he looked cool fighting those monsters. That's when he noticed she was hurt, so he quickly used his healing spell on her, and she thanked him again. He told her healing was all he could do, then spilled the whole story about how his crew had used him as live bait. Hearing that broke her heart, and she started crying for him. Right then and there, she made up her mind. She told him she was going to become an adventurer when she grew up, and when she did, she'd join his party and protect him. Lost was touched hearing that, but after she left with the knights, he thought about how unlikely it was. She probably came from some noble family, so the idea of them teaming up one day didn't seem real to him, but her words gave him a spark of hope, and he decided to give the adventuring life another shot. He found some mentors to train him in sword fighting and magic. While he only had his healing spell as a healer, he mastered a bunch of other skills. After his training, he finally found a new crew to roll with the Blades of Light. He figures it makes sense for him to be dreaming about all that. Lost knows he wouldn't be where he's at today if it wasn't for that girl's words back then. If he had quit being an adventurer, he never would have crossed paths with her again. As he's lost in thought, Narcina knocks on his door, asking if he wants to grab breakfast together. He agrees, and they head out to eat. Next, the scene cuts to them in the labyrinth. Lost says they're heading down to the lower levels today. Soon after, they find themselves on a labyrinth floor with a teleportation circle. Narcina is excited, saying she's never seen one before. Lost explains that not every labyrinth has these circles, and a magician put this one here after the place was discovered, but even he doesn't know much more about it. Narcina gets hyped, thinking they can use it to go anywhere, but Lost sets her straight. He tells her they can only jump to another teleportation circle. They'll need one on the other end to exit. Narcina sighed, thinking it would be way easier if they had a circle back in the city, but then she figures maybe they didn't place one there because monsters could swarm the city. Lost tells her that's not the issue. Monsters can't use these circles, but the knowledge to make them was lost hundreds of years ago, so they can't create any new one. They step into the teleportation circle and jump to the middle level. Lost warns Narcina that the monsters here are tougher than the ones they fought before, so she needs to stay sharp. The scene shifts to them in battle. Lost handles his share of monsters, but when Narcina tries to hit one, her punch slides right through it. Lost explains that it's a lick, a monster made entirely of spirit energy. Physical attacks won't do a thing against it. Narcina realizes that makes sense since she can see right through its body. Lost says they should fall back because without magic, they're at a disadvantage, but Narcina says she can take the lick down, and Lost immediately knows what she's getting at. He keeps the lick's attention while Narcina hides, getting ready for her move. As Lost runs, he explains that with enough training, people can learn to control their prana, the spirit energy inside them. With it, they can fight spiritual beings, even ones like the lick. Meanwhile, Narcina charges her fist with prana and takes out the lick with one solid punch. She's feeling good about the win, but Lost notices she's hurt. Checking her injury, he figures she got it during the attack on the lick. He pulls out an item and casts a healing spell on her, explaining that it's a magic item that boosts the power of healing spell. He goes on to say there's a magic stone inside the item. The guild collects these magic stones from adventurers and hands them over to craftsmen, who turn them into magic items and give them back to the adventurers. After Narcina's patched up, she asks Lost how much the magic stone might sell for. Lost thinks it should bring in a good bit of money. They sell the stone to Amherst, Amherst, and she pays them for it. On their way back to the inn, Lost is surprised at how much they made from the stone. As they walk through the town, they spot some people arguing in the street. They move in for a closer look and see two adventurers ready to throw hands. Lost tells Narcina that this kind of thing has been happening a lot lately. He explains that adventurers who've caused trouble elsewhere have been flocking to this town. Narcina remembers Amherst saying something about that too, and they notice rough-looking adventurers hanging around all over the place. Lost thinks it's a real headache for the serious adventurers, and he's clearly fed up with the mess, but he changes the topic, suggesting they splurge on a nice meal since they've just been paid. The scene cuts to them enjoying some fancy food at the inn. The innkeeper worries aloud if Lost can pay for everything. He reassures her not to sweat it and orders some ale. Seeing that, Narcina tries to order ale too, but she gets turned down because she's too young. She's annoyed, not liking being treated like a kid. After they finish eating, Narcina asks Lost about a strange-looking tower at the edge of town. She's seen similar structures all over the place but can't figure out what they are. Lost admits it's a bit weird. He tells her that he got curious once and asked the workers building the tower, but even they didn't know who hired them or why they were putting the towers up. Narcina's caught off guard hearing all that. Lost breaks it down, saying the builder only dealt with an agent who had the blueprints and the CAD, but that agent was working for another agent, and that agent was working for yet another one. It was a whole chain of middlemen between the builder and the real owner. Narcina figures whoever wanted these towers built didn't want anyone knowing who they were. Lost shrugs, saying it doesn't matter much as long as it's not hurting anyone. He points out that there are plenty of weird folks out there, but in his opinion, they'd be better off building a wall around the city instead of these towers. Narcina thinks back and realizes the city doesn't even have a wall. She mentions that she kind of likes the way the city looks without one, but Lost counters that it could be a problem if there's ever a war. He asks her how they'd stop outsiders from invading. Narcina, confident, says there's no need for walls with so many adventurers in the city. She figures they'll handle whatever comes their way. Lost admits she's got a point, and the two of them head back to their rooms. Just as Lost is about to enter his room, Narcina stops him, like she wants to say something. She hesitates though, and ends up just telling him goodnight. Later, lying in her bed, Narcina's thoughts drift to wanting to be in the same room as Lost, but she can't bring herself to say it. Meanwhile, Lost is also lying in bed, thinking it's nice to be part of a party again. He's unsure if he'll ever run into that little girl from his past, but thanks to Narcina, he knows he can keep adventuring a little longer. The scene shifts to Margulis, the leader of the Blades of Lightning, introducing a new healer named Lyra to the party. The rest of the crew doesn't exactly give her a warm welcome, and it bothers her a bit. Margulis is confident this new team will be able to take down the Hydra, and the scene changes to a dark and eerie place. Handsome is reporting to someone, saying the sleeping princess is in this city, and she's teamed up with Lost, pretending to be an adventurer. The old man he's talking to is shocked Lost is still hanging around. He says they need to find a way to take Lost out fast, and Handsome agrees they're running out of time. The crew heads back to the swamp to face off with the Hydra, and they're in luck, cause the Hydra hasn't grown its heads back yet. That means less work for them. Margulis wastes no time, comes up with a battle plan on the fly, saying he and Lyra will hit from the front, Armia will back them up with magic, and Saberia will creep up from behind. Margulis is about to charge in when Lyra throws up her hands, calling for a timeout. She's no fighter, she's a healer, and there's no way she's stepping up on the front line. Margulis looks at her like she's speaking a different language. Lost used to fight up front with them all the time. Lyra's in shock, asking how they made their old healer fight in the front lines, but Saberia remembers Lost never seemed to mind. Matter of fact, Saberia chimes in, Lost landed some solid hits, and was even the one who chopped off one of the Hydra's heads. Lyra's not buying it, but Margulis ain't expecting her to pull off moves like that. If she says she can't fight in the front, he's cool with it, but he checks if she can cast the detoxify spell to deal with the Hydra's poison, and she's good for that. Margulis calls out for everyone to get in position. They're taking the Hydra down today. Meanwhile, back in town, Lost and Narcina roll in from their latest labyrinth run, and Amherst is happy to see they've brought more gems for her to sell, but she gives Lost a heads up, telling him not to push Narcina too hard since she's still new to the game. Lost reassures her he's watching out for Narcina, keeping their fights under control. Amherst is glad they're playing it safe, but she reminds him there's only so much two people can handle. She suggests Lost and Narcina think about adding more folks to the party to lighten the load. Lost agrees having more people would make life easier, but in the end, he decides it's not worth the headache. Him and Narcina are making good money as is. Amherst can't argue with that. With the cash they're pulling in, they could even rent a house instead of sticking to the inn. Narcina's surprised you can rent a house in the city, so Amherst breaks it down. There's only so much stuff you can stash at an inn, but with a private room, you've got way more space, though it costs a pretty penny. But the real fun starts when you got both guys and girls in the mix, and with that extra privacy, it sets the stage for some late night moves. Narcina's all of a sudden hyped about renting out a private crib, though Lost didn't really trip on it, so Amherst is doubting any late night action is going down this time around. Speaking of private spot, Lost remembers Lightning Blade had one too, but they had him posted up in a storage closet, so it wasn't exactly a 5-star experience. Amherst cracks up at how bad they treated Lost, but to cheer him up, she tells him he might have lucked out getting kicked out of Lightning Blade. Ever since he left, Margulis and the rest of them ain't completed a single mission. Margulis is scratching his head, trying to figure out why, but Lyra can see clear as day dude's too slow to realize realize he ain't strong enough to take on a Hydra by himself. Margulis hears her, so he's about to blow up, but Lyra shuts him down, telling him to chill. She needs to focus on helping Armia get better. Armia was messed up real bad, hurt and poisoned, so Lyra's really gotta lock in. While she's doing that, Saberia's over there telling Margulis that, even though she hates to admit it, Lost might have been more useful than they gave him credit for. Lost wasn't the best healer, but he still managed to handle his business in the end. Plus, he didn't even realize they were hustling him for his cash, so he was the perfect team player. Now Margulis is kicking himself, wishing Lost never left, but Saberia reminds him that he's the one who booted Lost out in the first place and made a whole big scene about it. Margulis had completely forgotten about that, but now that he remembers, he thinks it'll be no sweat getting Lost back. All they gotta do is act, and Margulis is sure Lost will come running back, because after all, they're the famous Lightning Blade who would turn down a spot in the squad. We are the best, though Saberia is starting to wonder if she even wants to stick around anymore. By the next morning, Lyra finally finishes healing Armia. Armia wakes up, thanks her for the save, and Lyra's just happy she could help. She asks Armia if she's feeling up to eating, and since Armia's down, Lyra heads downstairs to grab her some food. When Lyra heads downstairs to ask where the food's kept, she notices Saberia and Margulis are nowhere to be found. She's got no clue where they ran off to. Meanwhile, Margulis and Saberia are posted up at the guild, and Margulis, loud as ever, announces that he's graciously ready to let Lost back into the squad. Everyone freezes, staring at him like he's lost it, and Lost is the most stunned of all. He can't believe what he's hearing, so he tells Margulis to say it again. There's no way someone could be this clueless. Margulis repeats it, word for word, and yeah, Lost heard him right, but Lost is still sitting there, wondering how to even respond to something so dumb. Narcina and Amherst peep what's going on, and Amherst fills her in. The blonde guy running his mouth is the same one who kicked Lost out, and now he's trying to get him back, acting like he's doing Lost some big favor. Lost isn't impressed by the speech, but before he can speak, Margulis starts assuming Lost might be mad about how they scammed him out of his pay while he was in the crew. Margulis throws out an apology, pretending it was all some big misunderstanding, and promises Lost a fair cut this time around. He even admits they could use his help, cause the new healer he hired ain't pulling her weight in fights. Saberia's thinking there's no way Lost would ever say yes to Margulis's nonsense, but to her surprise, Lost actually thanks him for the offer. Narcina ain't having it no way, she's letting Margulis swoop in and steal Lost from her. She rushes forward, yelling that Lost is never going back to Margulis's party. Lost places a hand on Narcina's shoulder, calming her down, telling her not to worry, he's not leaving. Then he turns to Margulis and says he was only being polite by thanking him, but he has zero interest in ever rejoining that crew. Margulis can't believe he's getting rejected, so he starts getting desperate, accusing Narcina of using Lost because she realized he's actually real useful to have around. His finger pointing is starting to wear thin on Lost's patience, so Lost grabs Margulis's hand and looks him dead in the eye. He warns him that if Margulis ever does anything to hurt Narcina, Lost will make sure his body ends up mangled beyond recognition. With that, Lost turns to leave, and Narcina takes a second to rub it in, throwing one last jab in Margulis's face before they walk out. After Lost and Narcina leave, Margulis is lost, but he's still dead set on taking down the Hydra. Frustrated, he starts barking at Amherst to find him a new adventurer, preferably someone who can hold their own on the front lines next to him. Amherst really doesn't want to deal with him, but before she can respond, a guy steps out from the crowd. This dude looks like he's already crushed all the side quests and rolled up with maxed out stats. The mystery man offers to join the crew and asks Margulis if his strength is up to par. Margulis sizes him up, and yes, the guy looks tough, but Margulis isn't about to take any chances. He draws his sword and charges at him to test his skill, but in one smooth swing, the man disarms Margulis in front of the entire guild, making him look like a complete fool. After shaking off the humiliation, Margulis accepts the guy into the party. Saberia, though, isn't feeling it. She's skeptical of anyone who rocks a mask all the time, but Margulis brushes it off, saying they've got no other option. If they don't take down that Hydra, the Lightning Blade's reputation is going to sink like Aquaman. Margulis steps up to the guy and asks his name. The man gives him a simple answer, Shig. Meanwhile, back at the inn, Narcina's checking herself in the mirror when she hears a knock on Lost's door. Curious, she heads over to see who it is and finds Sheila standing there. Her first thought is that Sheila might be trying to pull something with Lost, but after thinking it over, she figures that doesn't make sense. Lost finally opens the door, and Sheila lets him know that he's got visitors waiting for him downstairs. Lost is surprised, but decides to go check it out. When they get downstairs, Lost and Narcina meet up with Armia and Lyra. Armia's feeling guilty for dropping this on him so suddenly, but she asks if Lost could help them out just this one. Margulis is still planning to take down the Hydra, and even brought in a new warrior to back him up, but Lyra isn't convinced they've got what it takes to win without Lost's help. For starters, Margulis is still too hard-headed to buy an antidote potion because he's too cheap. He's not gonna realize how reckless he's acting until somebody ends up dead because of his stubbornness. Armia knows it's way too late to fix things with an apology, but she admits Lost's strength saved them last time. If he hadn't cut off that Hydra head in their last battle, the whole squad would have been wiped out. Lost doesn't think he did much, but Lyra reminds him how bad the party struggled against the Hydra that had already lost 2 heads. If that thing had been at full strength, they'd be toast. Lost asks Armia straight up what she's looking for him to do. Armia stands up and says she wants Lost Lost to fight alongside them again. She believes they've got a real shot at taking down the Hydra if he's there. Basically, she's asking him to rejoin Lightning Blade, but Lost already went through this mess with Margulis earlier, and his answer's still the same. Narcina's confused about why Armia is so eager to help Margulis out, given how tough all this must be on her. Armia admits yes, Margulis has a ton of flaw, but at the end of the day, he's still her party member. Narcina's fuming when she hears that, cause Lost was her party member too, but Armia didn't lift a finger to support him when he was getting treated like trash. Armia starts breaking down in tears and apologizes to Lost. She explains that back then, she was too scared to stand up to Margulis, afraid she'd get kicked out of the squad too. She's new to the adventuring life and doesn't know any other parties to join, but now she sees how wrong she was, and how wrong Margulis was for how he treated Lost. Even though she doesn't agree with how Margulis runs things, she still doesn't want to see him get himself killed in a fight they can't win. Lyra steps in and tells Lost that Armia's apology is legit. She's been tearing herself up over this for a while. Lost stands up, looks Armia in the eye, and tells her he holds no grudge against her. He accepts her apology, but he's clear he's not going back to Lightning Blade. Armia's a bit let down, but she respects Lost's decision and promises not to bug him about it anymore. Right after, Mary comes over with a spread of food, trying to lift Armia's spirits cause it's clear she ain't been eating right. While Armia digs in, Lost pulls Lyra aside and asks if there's any way for her to take Armia and ditch Margulis's crew. But Lyra makes it clear that if she could have done that, she wouldn't have come asking for help in the first place. Lost knows how Margulis treats people, so he straight up suggests Lyra leave his party too. But Lyra shuts that down quick, saying she can't abandon Armia to deal with Margulis on her own. The next day, Margulis finally introduces Lyra to Shig, since they're gearing up to fight the Hydra again. As soon as she sees him, Lyra feels like she's seen him before, so she pulls him aside for a chat. She asks why he's here and why he's hiding his identity, but Shig tries to play dumb, acting like they've never crossed paths. As he turns to leave though, Lyra spots the sword on his back. It used to belong to someone named Ronaldo, and she straight up accuses Shig of stealing it. Shig denies being a thief, saying the sword was passed down to him as a gift. He might have cleared himself of theft, but admitting he knew Ronaldo confirms for Lyra that he is the same Shig she used to know, even though she's figured him out. Lyra decides to keep his secret under wraps. It must be important to him. Later that day, Lost and Narcina head into the labyrinth like usual, but Lost can't shake his worry for Armia and the rest of Lightning Blade. He's not sure if they're really ready for what's coming. The scene jumps to Narcina fighting monsters in the labyrinth, taking them down without breaking a sweat, even when one tries to sneak up from behind. Lost watches and throws her a compliment. She just brushes it off, saying it's nothing and she can keep going, but then her stomach growls, loud enough for him to hear. Lost grins and jokes that maybe her stomach's reached its limit, even if she hasn't. She gets embarrassed and snaps at him, but he laughs and suggests they stop for lunch. She agreed. Next, they're eating the lunch they pack, and Lost is surprised at all the food, asking if there's something special going on. Narcina explains that Mary the innkeeper handed her all this before she left, saying she'd need to finish it up since their little friend couldn't. Then Lost starts explaining about Hydra. He tells her it's a powerful monster, with venom and scales tough enough to bounce attacks off easily. Regular physical and magic attacks don't even scratch it. Narcina is surprised it's that strong and hopes Armia will be okay. Lost reassures her that Hydras are common enough among higher level monsters that people have figured out ways to handle. He adds that Hydra poison is deadly, but there's a special antidote to counter it. Narcina remembers that Lyra said they didn't buy that antidote, and Lost explains that it's pretty expensive, so they're relying on Lyra's detox magic instead. Narcina's still worried, but Lost tells her there's no need. Lightning Sword isn't a bad team. Margulis might be goofy, but he knows his stuff with a sword, as long as he doesn't underestimate his opponent. And Saberia's agility is off the charts. She could even sneak up on a Hydra. Wide vision or not, Narcina's not too happy that he has such a high opinion of them, but he says he's just being honest. She stays worried though. Afterward, they keep going on their adventure, and Narcina tells Lost she's tired of the same labyrinth. She wonders if they can check out the wetlands today, and though Lost is a bit surprised, he agrees. We cut to Margulis and his crew taking on a Hydra. Margulis manages to injure one of its heads, and Shig gets another hit in on a different head. Margulis yells at him to chop it off, but Shig suddenly stops mid-swing and falls back. Margulis demands to know why he held back, and Shig says that this was supposed to be his prize, asking if Margulis is cool with letting him take all the credit. Margulis doesn't get it at first, so Shig spells it out. The title of Hydra Slayer would look good on you. Margulis, not the brightest, takes the bait and charges right in, but his attack barely does a thing. Meanwhile, Lyra finishes processing Saberia. She jumps back into the fight to distract the Hydra, giving Margulis an opening to attack. Armia's supporting everyone with her magic, and Lyra thinks they'll win if they keep this up. Then she notices Shig taking a break and wonders what he's plotting. Suddenly, the Hydra flings a rock with its tail, hitting Armia and taking her down. The Hydra starts moving toward her, and Armia faints from fear. As she's out cold, black smoke begins oozing from her body, and Saberia asks what's going on. Shig says it's her fear, explaining that monsters can actually feed on human fear, turning it into strength. He adds that fear like this usually isn't visible to the human eye. Just then, the Hydra starts drawing in the fear from everything around it. Lyra sees that the fear is turning into mana, and Saberia wonders if mana should even be showing showing up here? Lyra explains it doesn't usually. Normally, mana only appears in the deepest parts of the labyrinth. After absorbing all that mana, the Hydra begins to glow, and Lyra realizes it's mutating. She tells everyone that monsters can change their bodies by pulling in a lot of magic power, and sometimes it boosts their abilities by crazy amount. The Hydra then transforms into a way more powerful creature, and Seek yells to Lyra to go help Armia. She agrees, and Lost tells Margulis to fall back, but Margulis refuses, arguing that they've put in too much work to back down now. He tries to at least take off one of the Hydra's heads, but his sword shatters on impact, and the Hydra nearly lands a hit on him. Lost jumps in just in time to save him. Now Narcina, Lost, and Shig attack the Hydra together and manage to injure it, but only slightly. Then Shig tells Lost to go check on Armia and leave the Hydra to him. Lost agrees and asks Lyra about Armia's condition. Turns out, she's in bad shape, and Lyra explains her healing magic isn't working because Armia, as a wizard, has a resistance to magic. So Lost begins casting multiple layers of healing spells on her. Lyra watches, confused, wondering what he's doing. Saberia explains he's overlaying heal spells, that's how he's always done it. Lyra's shocked that such a technique actually works, comparing it to drinking a bunch of potions, which doesn't instantly cure a cold. She insists it shouldn't be possible. Margulis, clueless, says he doesn't know what a cold feels like since he's never had one, proving, as they say, that idiots don't catch cold. Lyra's still amazed at the layered healing, and Armia eventually wakes up after Lost's done. She spots him, thanks him, then falls right back asleep. Suddenly, the Hydra starts acting like it wants to take on Lost specifically, and Shig catches on to this. Lost wonders if the Hydra remembers him, and Narcina offers to help him out. Lost knows she won't back down even if he says no, so he agrees but tells her to pull back if things get dangerous. Shig then warns Lyra, Margulis, and Saberia to keep their distance from the beast, and they all agree. Lost and Narcina launch their attack, and Shig manages to slice off one of the Hydra's head. Margulis, surprised, wonders why Shig's sword didn't shatter like his did. Lyra explains it's because Shig has a magic sword. Margulis, shocked, realizes these magic swords are legendary weapons known for their great power. He can't believe Shig actually owns one and wonders who he really is. Narcina charges in to attack the Hydra, but she slips, and the Hydra flings her high into the air. She crashes down, knocked out cold. Lost realizes that the Hydra is looking to face off against him solo, using Narcina as a hostage to make sure no one else interferes. Saberia is shocked, wondering how a monster could be so smart. Lyra explains that mutated monsters can sometimes have advanced intelligence. Lost tells everyone to stay back while he faces the Hydra head-on, but after a rough battle, Lost ends up defeated, struggling to get up. Lyra shouts at him to keep going, and he tries to reach for his weapon, but then passes out. Suddenly, something shifts in him. He gets back on his feet, glowing with a powerful blue aura, and the others are totally stunned, trying to figure out what's going on. Out of nowhere, Lost grows a horn and starts slashing through the Hydra like it's nothing. After he takes it down, he collapses. The scene cuts to him waking up to Narcina calling his name. He's relieved to see she's okay, and she tells him that Lyra had an antidote ready, so she's fine now. Lyra points out that it wasn't cheap, and that she's going to bill them for it later. Lost looks over and notices Armia is still asleep. He's relieved to find out she's not in any danger. Lyra then asks him about that strange form he took on earlier, but Lost has no clue what she's talking about. Before he can think it over, Margulis jumps in, saying Lost is seriously strong, and with him around, even the toughest monsters won't stand a chance. Margulis adds that with Lost's help, they might even be able to take down Garlock the Destroyer. Lost tries to remind him that he turned down joining their party, but Margulis waves it off, saying money won't be an issue, they can split the magic stones from the Hydra between him, Saberia, and Lost. Margulis decides that since the two newcomers didn't help, they get nothing. And as for Narcina, since she's just Lost's sidekick, he suggests Lost just finds a way to keep her happy. Lost brings up Armia's situation, and Saberia bluntly says she's not useful anymore. There's a chance she may never wake up, and Margulis throws in the idea of selling her to some noble with pervy taste. Lost gets mad, but before he can even react, Narcina clocks Margulis with a solid punt. He's stunned, can't believe what just happened. He quickly reminds her that the guild doesn't allow adventurers to fight each other, and warns her that she could get kicked out for breaking the rule. He turns to the others, trying to get witnesses, but they all act like they didn't see a thing. Saberia steps up and says she saw everything, and will report it to the guild. Then Shig chimes in, saying he also heard something about someone planning to sell Armia to some creepy noble before she woke up. He points out that trafficking's a major crime, so they'll need to take Margulis and Saberia in. Margulis is shocked, asks Shig who he really is. The scene cuts to the guild, where it's revealed that Shig is actually Zeg, an elite adventurer straight from the Royal City's Adventurer Guild. We see him tying Margulis and Saberia up as he explains everything. Zeg drops his previous name, saying Shig was just part of his cover, and Lyra teases him, pointing out that his disguise was pretty weak. Amherst, the guild's receptionist, then asks why someone from the capital would be in their small town. Zeg reminds her that direct adventurers have the authority to monitor and regulate other adventurers. He explains that he came to investigate because the town's been having more trouble lately, and almost immediately, he stumbled upon Margulis's shady activities. Lyra asks what's going to happen to Margulis and Saberia now. Amherst responds that they're definitely getting kicked out of the guild, and could even face lifetime labor as punishment for human trafficking. Margulis tries to defend himself, saying it was was just talk, that they never actually did anything. But Amherst replies that the law's clear, and the two start blaming each other for getting caught. Later, Lost pulls Zeg aside, asking him to spare Margulis and Saberia. Zeg's surprised and asks why he'd want that. Lost explains that they didn't start out this way. Once, they just wanted to be good adventurers. But somewhere along the line, they got lost, chasing fame and money. Lost is sure they didn't mean for it to come to this, and hopes Zeg will give them one more chance. Hearing Lost's words from where they're being held, Margulis and Saberia feel regret start to sink in. Zeg decides to go along with Lost's request and tells Margulis and Saberia they're free to go. He warns them to get out of town and hopes they won't cross paths with him again. They quickly take off. Amherst is a bit worried about this whole situation, but Zeg reassures her that getting expelled from the guild might not be the best thing for them. It's better they stay adventurous and keep an eye on them. Amherst isn't convinced that this will actually help, pointing out that Marmot is a small town and things work differently here compared to the capital. Zeg figures he'll stick around for a bit to see how things play out, and Amherst is glad to hear it. Later at the inn, Zeg talks to Lyra and explains why he stayed behind. He wants to keep an eye on the adventurers in this town. He mentions that the guild back in the Royal City thinks the strange mutations happening here might be linked to the Marmot division, so he asks her if she can team up with him to investigate. Lyra agrees, but insists that Armia has to join them too. Zeg's curious why she's so set on that, and she explains she can't just leave her behind like that. Zeg nods, agreeing to let Armia tag along. Having more members makes sense since he'll need to keep an eye on even more people now, and he knows he can't leave Lost unsupervised either. Afterwards, Zeg and his crew sit down with Lost and Narcina over brunch. Lost is shocked to hear they put together a team with only 3 people and asks Armia if she's really okay rolling with them. She answers kinda shy, saying she doesn't have anywhere else to go, and Zeg and Lyra saved her life, so she owes them big. Lost and Zeg tell him they already said she doesn't have to feel guilty about it, but she stuck with them anyway, and Lost is glad to hear that. After that, Narcina and Lost head out to the guild early in the morning since they forgot to cash in the Hydra's magic stone last night. Lost has another reason, though he's thinking about Narcina's future. He tells her she ought to pick up a specific quest today since only hunting monsters won't get her too far as an adventurer. He explains that quests can be anything, taking down creatures, gathering rare ingredients, or escorting rich folks who pay a good chunk of change. Narcina is touched that Lost is thinking this much about her. When he asks if something's up, she blushes with embarrassment. Soon enough, they reach the guild, where everyone's throwing suspicious looks their way. Word's out about Lost beating the Hydra, and no one believes it. He quickly pulls Narcina aside, warning her to stay sharp now since there are plenty of bad types who'd love to swipe those Hydra stones from them. Right as he finishes, an adventurer named Marnell steps up and says he's got something to discuss with Lost. Lost stays cautious and asks if they have to talk now, which makes Marnell think he's nervous about the guys with him, so he tells them to clear out. Lost and Narcina aren't sure what to think, but they get the sense Marnell isn't after the Hydra stone. Marnell faces Lost and suddenly apologizes, throwing Lost off guard. Lost wonders what the hell is going on, and then Marnell says he's sorry for Margulis's behavior. He admits that everyone in town knew Margulis was scum, but no one warned Lost. Marnell confesses he told himself it wasn't his business and didn't want to stir things up with Margulis. He apologizes for not stepping up when Lost needed it and for letting folks clown on him for being incompetent. Suddenly, Narcina steps in and tells Marnell forgiveness won't come that easy. Marnell, a little nervous, asks her what he needs to do to earn Lost's apology. She says he should kneel before him for 3 days straight and apologize every single day. Marnell and the other adventurers are thrown by the intense punishment that this blue-haired girl's got in mind, but Lost stops her because he doesn't want people to hate him. He says he's not interested in dredging up the past and admits that even after beating the Hydra, he's still got a long way to go as a healer. Extending his hand to Marnell, he suggests they try to get along better from here on out. Marnell shakes his hand gladly and tells Lost to reach out if he ever needs backup, then heads back to his group. Afterwards, Lost and Narcina go over to the reception desk to hand in the Hydra's magic stone. Amherst practically drools when she sees it. It's enough to turn them into millionaires. She points out that the Hydra was already a tough beast, and since it mutated, the stone's worth shot up. But she also warns that the mutation hints a disaster could be brewing. Narcina is confused by how serious Amherst and Lost look talking about the mutation, so they break it down for her. Monsters need massive amounts of mana to mutate. Usually, that only happens in the deeper dungeon floors. If it mutated on the surface, that means something unnatural is causing a mana surge up top. Amherst says other adventurers have reported similar issues, and things might be getting dangerous. Narcina asks why the guild hasn't done something, like sending a team to check it out. Just then, Amherst's boss Handsome shows up. She tenses up when she hears him, and quickly tells him the adventurers had a suggestion. Handsome agrees to hear them out directly, and invites them to his office, where he reviews the report on the Hydra's mutation and high-level monsters showing up on the dungeon's upper floors. Handsome shrugs it off, saying stuff like this has happened before, so it's not exactly out of the ordinary. He adds that the guild doesn't have the time or resources to send out an investigation team every time something strange pops up. Lost tries pushing him, saying the guild's supposed to protect its adventurers, but Handsome hits back, saying adventurers know the risks they're signing up for. He even tells Lost that if he's so scared of monsters, he should get out of town. When they step out of the office, Narcina's Narsina's boiling over, letting out all the frustration she built up in those 5 minutes with Handsome. She snaps, asking who the hell he thinks he is telling Lost to leave. Amherst tells her that he's the top dog around here, at least for now. The guild leader's old and barely leaves his room, and Handsome, being his right hand, is the one running the show. Lost changes the subject and asks Amherst to line up some quest for Narsina. She shows them the available job, and Narsina grumbles that most of these don't even feel like real work. Amherst flicks her forehead, saying as long as it brings in money, she shouldn't get picky about the type of job. Lost finds a quest to hunt down a phoenix near the teleportation circles in the dungeon. Narsina jumps at it, saying they'll take it. Amherst warns her to hold up, pointing out that with just a healer and a martial artist, they don't stand a chance against a flying creature. Right away, Lost and Narsina think about teaming up with Zeg's crew, so they head straight over to their base. Zeg and Lyra are on board, but Army is hesitant, thinking Lost probably wouldn't want to work with her. After everything that went down, Lost reassures her, saying she's already forgiven, so she shouldn't worry about it. With everyone on the same page, Zeg heads to the guild to sort out the paperwork, while the others go to the market for supplies. Lost tells Narsina they need to pick up potions to handle burns from fighting the phoenix. She's impressed, saying he knows his stuff, but it also makes her feel a bit inadequate. She starts spacing out in the middle of the road, and out of nowhere, a girl sneaks up behind her and grabs her. Narsina breaks free and swings a punch at the redhead, but the woman flips and dodges her with ease. Narsina's shocked when she realizes the mischievous molester is actually Ralma, a veteran adventurer, and an old friend of her dad. She puts 2 and 2 together and figures out her dad sent Ralma after her, worried about his daughter running off. Just then, Lost shows up, and both he and Ralma look stunned to see each other. They go way back. Lost greets her respectfully, calling her master, which leaves Narsina totally confused. They all go to a nearby restaurant, where Lost explains he trained under Ralma for a bit. Narsina mentions that her dad and Ralma are friends, and her dad sent Ralma to check on her. Then Ralma tells Lost to give her and Narsina some space since there's personal stuff she needs to discuss. But Lost refuses, saying he's in Narsina's party, so he's got a right to know what's going on. He also suspects Ralma might try to drag Narsina back by force, and he's not about to let that happen. Ralma smirks, taking it as a challenge, and asks if he really thinks he can stop her. She fires off a small flame at him, but he dodges with perfect timing. Ralma's impressed by how much Lost has improved and agrees to let him stay. She turns to Narsina and asks why she ran off from home. Narsina insists she didn't run away. She says she left in a rush, so she couldn't say a proper goodbye, but she left a note saying she was going to find Lost. Both Lost and Ralma are stunned by this, and Ralma pushes further, asking her why she came looking for him. Narsina falls silent, hiding her face, too embarrassed to admit she'd been having her dad's men spy on Lost. When she found out he got kicked from his party, she raced out to be by his side. Lost tells Narsina she should go back home and work things out with her dad, but she's worried he won't let her come back to Lost's side. She's holding back tears, so Ralma steps in, saying her dad isn't against her being an adventurer, he was just worried about her running off without a word. Ralma promises to talk to her dad, making sure he knows she's safe with Lost. Then, Ralma sends Lost off to grab some drinks and starts nudging Narsina about what's really going on between her and Lost. Narsina starts talking about how amazing Lost is, but then pairs up, feeling she's nothing but a burden to him. Ralma reassures her, saying she's definitely made a difference. Lost wouldn't have dared to stand up to her before, but now he's stronger and more confident. Ralma tells Narsina she's had a real, positive impact on him and encourages her to keep spending time with him. Later that night, Ralma stood in front of the guild building, wondering what the old guild leader Mist was planning. The next morning, everyone prepares to face the Phoenix. Sheila gives Lost some food and, worried about him, tells him to be careful. Narsina suddenly appears, takes the lunch bag from Lost, and tells Sheila don't worry, I'll be by his side, and that makes Sheila worry even more. Then they leave the town. The scene then cuts to Lost and the others landing on the middle floors of the labyrinth. Narsina's pumped up to face the Phoenix, but the creature doesn't appear. She was expecting it to charge at them right when they stepped in, but Lost tells her it's too cramped here for the Phoenix to make a move. Narsina starts to wonder about the size, and Lost explains that phoenixes come in all sorts of sizes, but none of them could squeeze through this narrow passage to reach this spot. They keep moving forward, and Zeg mentions that flying creatures don't usually vibe with tight spaces. If they had their way, they'd be somewhere wide open with plenty of room above. Soon, they stumble into a huge open area, and Lyra is sure the Phoenix is here. She points out this is a new path that's barely been explored, which has adventurers thinking there might be hidden treasure around, but the Phoenix is blocking the way forward, so some adventurers have put out a job to take it down. Lost spots scorch marks on the nearby pillars and figures the Phoenix must be around. He tosses a rock forward, hoping to lure the Phoenix out, knowing it's a territorial creature. Sure enough, the Phoenix appears from a portal above, sweeping through the room in a flash. The scene cuts to the Adventurers Guild. Ralma walks in, catching the eye of Amherst, who's quick to greet her with all the charm in the world. Ralma notes that this guild feels welcoming to adventurers, and Amherst agrees, saying they only exist because of the adventurers. But really, Amherst is laying it on thick because she knows Ralma is a top-ranked adventurer. She observes that even though Ralma's outfit isn't flashy, the fabric's high-end, and each piece of jewelry she's got on is actually an expensive magic item. Amherst's dead set on keeping her close, knowing Ralma's a real heavyweight in the adventuring world. Amherst asks asks Ralma what she can do for her, and Ralma straight up says she wants to meet the branch president. Amherst asks again, thinking the request is odd, but Ralma insists, saying she wants to meet Mist. Amherst then checks if Ralma has any kind of referral or appointment, but Ralma's got neither. Amherst figures she must know Mist personally, but Ralma says no, though she's got some business with him, and by business, she means she wants him dead. Hearing that, Amherst immediately denies her access, thinking Ralma must be out of her mind. Ralma, seeing she's not getting in politely, decides she'll have to throw down. She starts casting a fireball, but before she can let it loose, Handsome steps in and stops her. He acknowledges her by name, and Amherst realizes she's dealing with the Flame Fool. Handsome lets Amherst know that if Ralma's serious, she could burn the whole building to the ground. Ralma's relieved someone with authority finally showed up. Meanwhile, back in the labyrinth, the Phoenix keeps flying around, making Narcina think her punches and Lost's sword aren't going to do much here. Lost mentions it might have been smart to bring a bow, but Narcina's not too worried since the Phoenix isn't attacking up close. Right then, the Phoenix hurls a fireball at Narcina, and Lost pulls her out of the way just in time. He warns her that the fireball is the Phoenix's nastiest attack, and Narcina thinks it's far from fair. Back at the guild, Handsome asks Ralma if she's there about the same issue as an adventurer from the day before. He explains that yesterday, an adventurer came by, saying something went down in the labyrinth and wanting them to handle it. Ralma asks what he told the guy, and Handsome says he told him to leave town if he's too scared to go into the labyrinth himself. Ralma makes it clear her business is different, and she comments that it's been a while since she's been in Marmont, but the place seems overrun with thugs now. Handsome says they're concerned too, but Ralma thinks they're behind it and asks why they'd let things get this way. She doesn't know what's going through their heads, but she's certain they're plotting something. She points to the new pillars scattered around town, wondering what's up with those. Handsome tells her he's just as clueless and insists it's got nothing to do with the guild. Ralma doubts him, thinking he's playing dumb. He asks if she's got proof linking the pillars to the guild, but Ralma says it's a gut feeling. Handsome laughs, calling her theory a stretch. Ralma says for a city of the labyrinth, the Adventurers Guild holds absolute power, and the branch president is practically the city's king, but he's acting like he doesn't know what's going on, which doesn't sit right with her. Handsome reminds her he's only the president's right-hand man, but she knows he's just pretending. He tells her if she's got a problem with how things are run, she should hit the road. Ralma's convinced there's something fishy here, noticing that anytime an adventurer questions the guild, they get told to leave. She suspects they're trying to keep folks from sticking around, and Handsome asks what she thinks their angle is. Ralma figures something huge is about to go down, something that might need a bunch of expendable adventurers. She's pretty sure it'll look a lot like a labyrinth rampage, where casualties won't raise any eyebrow. The scene cuts back to the labyrinth, where the Phoenix is going wild, firing off flames everywhere. Zeg sees the room turning into a furnace and realizes this won't end well. Lyra notes that handling the heat's going to be tough, but the real problem is the air. The fire's burning up all the oxygen, and they won't be able to stay much longer. Lost catches on that the Phoenix is trying to force them out to defend its turf, and Narcina remarks that monsters are supposed to attack humans on sight, not try to scare them off. Lost says the Phoenix needs to know it can't take on all 5 of them alone. Sure, monsters might not be thinkers, but this one has got to follow its instinct. Zeg says they've got no choice but to throw down now and asks Armia if she can work some water magic. She mentions that she can, so he tells her to aim for the Phoenix's wings. He explains that those flames on its wings are basically like feathers, so if they can douse them with water, it'll drag the beast down, and then he can finish it off with his sword. Armia hesitates, worried it'll take time to cast her spell, but Zeg reassures her, saying he'll protect her until it's ready. Narcina jumps in, promising to help keep her safe too, which boosts Armia's confidence. With their support, she decides to go for it. Zeg, Lost, and Narcina then move in to keep the Phoenix distracted while Armia starts casting. Lyra watches, knowing that this is a big deal for Armia, especially with her past holding her back. She hopes Armia can find the strength to trust her teammates, believing that if she can, she'll be a solid adventurer. Armia finally fires off a small water arrow at the monster. It works, the Phoenix is dragged lower, and Zeg strikes, but the hit isn't deep enough. The monster rises again, but Lost feels like they have a real shot if they can keep this up. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Handsome is thinking the labyrinth's rampage sounds bad, but he's not too worried, it doesn't usually happen. Ralma points out that it could explain a lot of the weird stuff around town lately. She's especially concerned about the monster mutation, mentioning that the mana around the labyrinth is through the roof. Back in the labyrinth, we see the Phoenix changing, growing bigger as its flames shift from orange to blue. Narcina, thinking mutations are supposed to be rare, and Lost's right there with her, saying it's not normal to run into them twice in a few days. Armia gets freaked out by the mutated monsters, wondering why they keep showing up around her, and Lyra tries to chill her out, but Armia's too far gone for words to help. Lyra's worried this could get bad. If Armia lets fear take over again, that'll just make the monster stronger. She knows Armia has to shake off the fear now, or she'll miss her chance to grow, but Lyra's stumped on how to help. Just then, the Phoenix charges at Armia, and Lyra yells for her to dodge, but Armia's frozen in place. The Phoenix fires a fireball, but Zeg slices through it and saving her. The Phoenix keeps hurling fireballs, and Zeg cuts down every single one, telling Armia they need her help to take this thing down. Lyra reaches out to her, and Armia finally steps up to join the fight. She asks for a second to get ready, and they give her space. Meanwhile, Ralma's left the guild. She's thinking she never never expected them to be up front. She heads over to the stone pillars around the city, using her fire magic on them, realizing these aren't just any stones and wondering what they really mean. Back in the labyrinth, we see Narcina landing a punch on the phoenix, but it barely phases it, and her hand catches fire. She manages to put it out just as the phoenix attacks her, but Lost steps in, only to have his sword start melting from the heat. Army is gearing up to cast another attack spell, and Lyra helps her by healing her stamina, knowing it's tough to pull off back-to-back attack spell. Armia fires off an ice arrow, hitting the phoenix and knocking it down from the sky. Although it quickly regains its wing, Zeg's ready to take it head-on, but Narcina punches it back down, giving Lost the chance to finish it off with a strike from his knife. After they take down the phoenix, Lost gives Armia props for a job well done, saying it was her magic that sealed the deal. Everyone backs him up on that. Armia is so touched that she starts tearing up, thanking everyone for the support. She picks up the magic crystal from the monster, and while everyone else is celebrating, Lyra leans over to Zeg, saying Lost didn't transform this time. Zeg wonders what that transformation last time really meant, and decides he's gonna keep an eye on Lost for a bit. Later, they're all chilling at the inn when they run into Ralma, who's already sipping on a drink. She asks if they managed to take down the phoenix, and they're curious how she even knows about it. Ralma laughs, saying she got a chatty girl to spill the story for a little cash. Seeing their relaxed faces, she figures they really did beat the monster. She then teases them, saying they ought to use that reward money to buy her dinner, but Lost knows she's got her eye more on the drinks than the food. They all sit down for a meal, and Narcina mentions that she never knew food could taste this good before coming here. Ralma rolls her eyes, saying this meal's nothing special, and even the meat's plain and tough. Sheila, the server, overhears and isn't too happy about it, leaving with a huff. Ralma chuckles and tells Narcina to savor the soup since she won't get anything like it back at the mansion. Hearing Mansion throws the others for a loop. Realizing Narcina hasn't shared her background, Ralma spills that Narcina is actually the daughter of the Earl of Enelstria. Everyone's stunned, and Lost finally connects the dots. She's the same girl he saved back then. Meanwhile, Handsome is giving Mist the lowdown on that mutation they saw, and he mentions Ralma's in town too. Mist decides he's going to need his disciples' help with whatever's coming next.